Well, good morning, everybody. If you only got a couple minutes today, I just want to give you a quick overview of the things I think that have changed a lot in the last 24 hours. We have seen a little bit of kind of flex off to the west in terms of the track of Hurricane Lee, potentially impacting more of the Northeast. Some of the newest model runs have kind of shifted a bit in this direction. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. We do have another system following this that's going to possibly put another tropical system, probably hurricane strength, over the same kind of region as Lee, but some of the longer range indications suggest that this doesn't get close to the United States. Secondly, we had some pretty cold air this morning in the upper Midwest. You can see we've already had temperatures get down there below freezing. This is not uncommon for mid-September in this area, but we're going to be watching a lot of the upper Midwest here for some frosty conditions, including parts of Wisconsin, Minnesota, and the UP of Michigan. You can also see it's pretty cold in the mountains, which is typical. That's not that far out of the norm, but I do want to show you that some of the new long-range forecasts from the European model are attempting next week. See this in here? This is this weekend into next week to drop some snow into the Rocky Mountains. So we're going to have to start looking at these maps again here pretty soon. And then lastly, and this may be the most significant for the Midwestern part of the United States, is that we have seen a transition in the forecasts, especially in the European model, going pretty aggressively over wetter in the central United States. We need to talk about kind of what system is prompting this and what it might mean, given that we've talked so much lately about how dry parts of the central United States and big sections of the upper Midwest have been, despite attempts at bringing in some decent rainfall into those areas. So that's kind of the quick overview. Let's get into some of the details. The last 3 days, total accumulated precipitation is shown here. Again, what we're watching is this front that's been moving through, flooding throughout parts of New England, just additional rainfall over what already fell in the last week in this region. A lot of places missed by this frontal boundary and the rainfall that it did deliver here through the first 3 days of this week. We saw very heavy rain. We talked about this yesterday down in parts of the southern plains. We're going to continue to watch this area stay wetter over the coming days as well, as this big high pressure cell just sinks into the southern U.S. and leaves a frontal boundary kind of draped in this area for a few more days here. But we need to put all that in context as we normally do. And just to look back over the last couple of weeks, it's important to note that while I show you maps like this a lot, anytime you see color, it just, my brain, I don't know about yours, but tends to just think wet. But that's not the case, right? So you put that into the broader context of a couple of weeks, and it begins to illustrate how dry things still are in a lot of places. So especially throughout the Ohio Valley, parts of the Missouri Valley, the upper Mississippi Valley, down into the Tennessee Valley, these big river systems, right, come down to the Red River Valley. And we just look there in south and see some extremely dry conditions still in place, not only over the last couple of weeks, but even beyond that. Now, it's on the flip side of that coin, we can also see where it's been wet. This, of course, captures the deep trough that flooded out the Burning Man event here. And then we saw the extremely heavy rainfall that came out of parts of Wyoming, Montana, western parts of the Dakotas, and also some heavy rain in Kansas. And then you can see here, this is Idalia. Okay, remember, Idalia was inside that 2-week window here. But the bigger context, just going back over a month, I think is revealed pretty easily in this map. These are these precipitation ranks maps I like to show. So since mid-August, we can see that we have a lot of climate reporting districts here throughout the Corn Belt that are reporting their driest. So parts of South Dakota, Minnesota, northern Iowa, this part of Wisconsin, driest such 30 days on record, while most of this is from Hurricane Hillary and that deeper trough that hit the west. So that just kind of gets us the bigger picture. I just want to keep showing you things we've been talking about. So let's go ahead and have a look at the Mississippi River. It's maintained that level. It dropped down to about 9.9 feet. And the concern is without much more moisture coming in another week, we'll see this continuing to go down. Now, we've made a case that we think that later in September and then in October, it's expected to be wetter throughout the Mississippi Valley, the whole of the Mississippi Valley, meaning that this year's drop in level way down here has been earlier than it was a year ago. Now, last year became a major problem in the month of October. So here's October, right? Major problem in the month of October into early November, where we had the barge traffic issues, just to remind you of what was going on there. I also did want to show you some new updates from some satellite-derived NDVI data. And I'm particularly thinking about parts of the southern plains that have been so dry. I mean, we can see Texas's NDVI value here. It is certainly in that lower half of the distribution. Average would be the black line here. A year ago is this line, and there we currently sit. We can kind of walk throughout the United States. There's, Oklahoma has really dropped off lately. And a bit surprising, Kansas has as well. Compared to average, it's dropped off given some of the heavier rains that we have seen. But if you kind of come into the northern plains, don't mean to skip over Nebraska, but come up here into parts of South Dakota, which has lately made a downturn, Minnesota, which has done the same. Let's take South Dakota off there. There you go. And same thing with Iowa. These are these really dry areas here. We're now well below the normal NDVI values. And I just pick out these drier areas to make a point here, but would encourage you to come to this. I'll link it below so you have access to it again to look at any state in the country. And I'm curious what California looks like. Yeah, it's been on the up, mainly because of some recent rains, and Nevada's probably going to push that all the way to the highest. I imagine they had a big, I haven't looked, I apologize, but I imagine they had a big desert bloom after all of that rainfall. So highest NDVI values there in the last 20 years. So please go play around with the website. It's a good one to be looking at and using. Okay, on satellite, the sun was rising this morning here across the East Coast. You can actually see the front right there, right? And you can see how it's just kind of stalling out up against the Rocky Mountains here. And we're going to see how much more rain we can get off of that barrier in the coming days. But this is Hurricane Lee. 115 mile an hour winds have been maintained. Last night had a pretty clear eye that we could see on infrared. I'm taking you back to yesterday. There we go. This was the frontal boundary coming through, and then had a secondary shot at some cooler air here that brought in some showers into this section of Wisconsin, Iowa, and Illinois. Again, a very, very dry region. Now, overall, as we kind of look at this as it plays out and goes forward, we want to talk next about where Hurricane Lee is expected to go, and I'm going to give you the newest National Hurricane Center update. So again, what's kind of shifted here is we saw a couple of the model runs take this a bit farther, in this direction. Not much, but enough that it puts more of New England into play. Now remember, while Hurricane Lee today has 115 mile an hour winds, we do not expect this to just keep maintaining that incredible strength as it goes north. Most of the evidence is this is going to rapidly, kind of get spread out by wind shear. It's going to get less total energy in it, which means we're expecting the wind field to come down. But it could still be at tropical storm strength, which means wind speeds sustained above 39 miles an hour, but below 74 as it comes on shore here. Looking at the newest kind of super ensemble here, we can see that. Watch the very end of this. So this is out there on the 15th, 16th, 17th, right in through here. Did you see how there's that little turn at the very end? Just a lot of model runs suggesting that as the one trough leaves north and the second one comes in, so it's coming in like this, it's going to help just pull this toward it temporarily and bringing more of, to be honest, like from Cape Cod, all the way here along Massachusetts border with the Atlantic, New Hampshire and Maine, and also New Brunswick and Nova Scotia still into play. But in terms of where the center of this thing's going to go, we're talking somewhere probably between Nova Scotia and Maine, maybe New Brunswick. But I want to remind you something. That's why I show you these satellite images. You can see the size of this system. So there's going to be a broader area impacted by the cloud cover and rain, as we bring this in. So let's go have a look at a couple of those different things here. Here's, first of all, the wind speed. So as we play this forward, I'm just going to use the European model as some base guidance here. And just note that the GFS is faster in bringing it north. But overall, this is what we're expecting. So you can see wind gusts here from 30 to 50 miles an hour, and along the coast upwards of 60 out here at Cape Cod. They may approach a hurricane force wind in that area. We'll have to see if the National Hurricane Center ends up issuing a hurricane watch for this area because of those numbers. So this is it. That's what we're expecting. This is through Sunday. Let's just take it all the way out there to 12Z on Monday morning. So that would be for them at 5 a.m. Or no, 6 a.m., excuse me. So I want to flip this over and show you another model. So this is the GFS. Maybe. There we go. And the GFS, similar overall. So I'm kind of building some confidence in some of these numbers here. The next thing I want to take a look at, let's just leave it on the GFS and go grab the precipitation. We'll look at precipitation totals. So we just know that there's a good chance for 1.5 inches of rainfall, 2 inches here. The farther you go east, the higher the amounts. And then into Maine, possibly 4 to 5 inches of rainfall are there in the GFS. And in the European model, we see pretty similar numbers, although heavier rainfalls farther inland here from the GFS. So we've kind of got a better idea on what to expect out of this as it eventually gets here to our northeast coast and then eventually into the Canadian Maritimes. So with that, let's flip over and have a quick look at the ocean wave height pattern. We've looked a lot at this week at this particular set of maps, and not too much difference. I mean, again, we see this 10 to 12 color, this bright yellow in through here, suggesting that we're going to have some pretty rough seas right up along the East Coast. And then, of course, 40 to 50 foot waves right near Lee's right-hand side. What will be very interesting would be to just see what this looks like coming on shore. Acadia National Park is right in here. It's like Bar Harbor's in here. I know I say that wrong, but whatever. When you get in here, you will. It'd be interesting to see this water slam into the extremely, cliff-like rock formations in this area. So this is going to be rough along the coast here. Very rough. A lot of beach erosion and some pretty massive waves. So be prepared for that. Okay, outside of that, let's go ahead and look at the pattern overall in the tropics. Okay, we have another system we're watching behind it, 97L. Right now, it's not expected to be an impact on the U.S. land, but it could be coming over into this same area, which means it's going to start to show up on our kind of U.S.-centric forecast model runs here in a little bit. No activity to speak of still forming in the Gulf of Mexico, despite, temperatures in the upper 80s and places low 90s for ocean temperatures here. We don't have all the other ingredients to get this to go. So a lot of activity right now as we hit the peak of the hurricane season out here in the open Atlantic. So what are we looking at for the next 7 days? Newest from the WPC. We've got a lot of area in through the Missouri Valley, getting up here into the Ohio and Mississippi Valley, all the way over to Pennsylvania. It's looking pretty dry. Isolated storms all along that front. Heavy rains in Florida, central Texas, and then, of course, with Hurricane Lee. But there is a system we're going to be watching carefully, trying to get through the Rocky Mountains and over here into the Midwest about a week from now. That could really start to increase rainfall chances across a broad area that, as you saw at the beginning, have been pretty dry. Before we get there, though, most of the flow goes into British Columbia. We'll be watching for increased chances throughout the Rockies and some rain finally getting into the very dry sections here of the Willamette Valley, I-5 corridor in Oregon and Washington, but not talking about too terribly much there overall. So this is what the pattern's up to. Here's today. This is the deeper trough that we've been watching now, I guess, for 10 days to see how it was going to interact with Lee. Now you can see the separation is pretty significant, but that's the trough that brought in the cooler air. So notice how quickly it advances and just scoots on out way over here now before Lee even gets close. That's what's allowing Lee to get closer. We have a second trough that sweeps through right there. This would be this weekend. There's going to be some rain on this one. Another shot at some cooler air coming through here. But it's what's behind it that has changed in the model. So I'm going to take you right out here. I don't know, let's go to next Tuesday afternoon. You see this feature? Do you remember earlier in this week, that trough was actually way out over here. And the models have been very progressive in trending it farther inland. They still have this subtropical jet cranking into this area, so it's kind of coming through in two pieces like this. And this is, again, next Tuesday, which means as this trough dives in and it's met up with the subtropical jet to the south, we're going to just see better reason to get air to rise in the midsection of the country. So that sweeps through next Tuesday, Wednesday. See that, the presence of that trough? And then we get out here to Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and the next trough that dives in is again here, not out over the open Pacific. So we've watched the models do an eastward shift in the overall position of the end of the month or the third week and fourth week of the month jet stream pattern. So remember what we're watching here. Oops, let's take that off. Let's go back again. Is what's underneath, or it's not what's underneath this, forgive me. What's over the top of this. And it's this right there. So this is the subtropical jet we were talking about. See it coming through? There it is. And that is the thing that I think could initiate decent storm systems going through. So let's go have a look at it by comparing the GFS on the left to the European model on the right. Now playing this forward, we're going to watch again. See the front by tonight all the way to the coast. Scattered showers and storms all along the periphery. Look at that. Right into there as high pressure settles in. Lee, both models. If we play it on forward, this is getting out there to Friday early in the morning. So we just walk through Thursday. There's Thursday. Now remember, on Thursday, we have this front coming all the way like here. There's the low that takes off and gets into this area. And there's the fronts kind of joining up in both models. You can see it. So that's the front that we're going to watch Thursday into Friday and Saturday slink through parts of Canada into Ontario and leave a front right here over the Great Lakes stretching all the way down to Oklahoma and Texas right there on Saturday afternoon. Now that front swipes through and brings in a little bit of rainfall, but not much. We get some heavier rain over the Appalachian Mountains, and while that's going on, that's when Lee is expected to hit. So right now, it could be late Saturday afternoon is when I think Lee's going to hit. And you can see the GFS on the left, European on the right. I'll play it a couple of times here to get a sense of where the operational runs are putting this. It's now just 96 to 100 hours away. All right. So as that front dives through, after that, we get into early next week. Now remember, this is when the subtropical jet's kicking in. So we see better chances for some snow and some rain in the Rocky Mountains. And then here it is next Wednesday. That's the system. Now you can see it in the GFS curling up into low in southern Saskatchewan like this. The European's different. It's got the low farther to the south and this broad area out ahead of it opening up to showers and storms. But that's where this rain could be coming in next week. And we'll watch that just to see how much rain we do get out of this, given how dry it is in those areas. So in terms of probabilities over the next 7 days, this is your chance at getting at least an inch of rain. On the dry side of this, there's a big area that's dry. That's your next week. But I'm going to take it back to the 1-inch number and just show you what happens when we add in the next 7 days. See how we're seeing increasing chances in this area of bringing in moisture? So this is quite important for the harder winter wheat belt. It's important for the overall water health of much of the western corn belt. And so we're going to watch this next system rolling through. Again, this is starting like next Tuesday, Wednesday, and lasting through Thursday, Friday. That's the system we're going to keep an eye on here. Okay, on the temperature side of it, we started off showing you the cooler temperatures. These were the forecast low temperatures for this morning, and this is tomorrow morning. That's our last day kind of the really cold air in the upper Midwest. We see after this some warmer conditions start to come in as the cooler air moves to the east. So you see a lot of lows in the 40s and 50s here. Not uncommon for September, but it is on the colder side of things. The high temperatures today, a lot of 60s and 70s, and they extend all the way down into parts of Texas. Again, much warmer in the northern plains than the southern plains right now. A lot of cloud cover down there, of course. This is Thursday's highs, getting into Friday and Saturday when the west begins its warm up here. But we got cooler air in the central United States that progresses east. And then out ahead of that system next week, we're going to get a pretty big warm up out of it, all right? But expect the temperatures to be to be fluctuating a lot. It is September, and that's normal. So here's your next 5 days. Here's day 5 through 10. That's the warm-up ahead of that system. And then day 10 through 15. So we get this progression of the temperature pattern overall. And there's a lot of things we can link this to. Your normal seasonal fluctuations in temperatures, the recreation of decent cold fronts. We know we don't see a lot of those in summer, but we get them in late summer and fall. And we have a lot of other things kind of bouncing around, like the Southern Oscillation Index. Remember, we're looking at numbers staying below that line. That would be the -7 line. So below that would be El Nino conditions. And as we talked about, we said this is just going to bounce around in a sinusoidal pattern for a while as El Nino begins to take its full grip. There's other things that are fluctuating as well. The whole momentum of the atmosphere has been roller coastering. Is that even a word? It's been bouncing up and down here. And what I'll be watching to see go away is this feature right in through here. Once we see the subtropical jet really get going, we'll eliminate this particular piece and we'll start to see a whole lot more stronger zonal winds in this whole region between 30 north and 60 north, which would mean that the fall and winter pattern has much more westward momentum in it, meaning the jet stream, both subtropical and polar, are going to have a bit more to say about North America and weather going forward. Now, if you look right in through here, see this? This is mostly being driven by what's going on in the Indian Ocean. And so remember how we talked about the Indian Ocean dipole? Well, we've had very strong trade winds that then kind of curl and go up here like this across India. This is a symptom overall of the coupling between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean as this positive Indian Ocean dipole event takes over and this positive ENSO event we call El Nino takes over. But what I want to do with this map is I want to take you back around the world and back to South America. I want to show you why we've been so dry everywhere except for along the ridge, which is right here. There's been a large area right in through here of high pressure. And so the flow is coming in this direction and it's kind of curling around like that. Now, you get moisture squeezed out over here with the elevation increase. But I want you to remember this. This is not the source of moisture that the Brazilians need to get going. What we have to watch for is a change from the winds coming from here to coming from there. So if these winds shifted and instead the flow came across Brazil like this is very high humidity air. This is very low humidity air. And it is because of that we're not getting the early start to the monsoon. But there is down here a deep low, and yes, they spin in the opposite direction in the southern hemisphere, and this deep low down here is what's continuing to cause this part of southern Brazil to just get extremely wet. So as you play this out over the next 10 days, remember, we're already seeing flooding in southern Brazil down into Uruguay, but this is going to add more to it, while the monsoon does not get pulled into action just yet. So all of the wettest weather is farthest to the west, where the elevation changes. So this is going to cause a bit of a slow start to the South American monsoonal season, which is why we have a lot of growers here, even though they can start planting in a couple days here. They're going to start, they have to wait until the moisture gets there. So that's the latest I got for you on South America. I'm going to stop there, and I'll pick this up again tomorrow morning. Thanks.